I'm really, really excited to have a magician with us. I think this is a first, and really fascinating to hear you tell us about your ideas around magic as a metaphor for innovation.
Well, it's kind of interesting how it came to be. It's a process that is been incorporated by corporations around the world, but it's actually a process that I began learning when I was 10 years old.
How did that happen? What motivated you to learn to be a magician at the age of 10? Well,
I had an interesting challenge as a kid. I grew up and I had an uncle who was a magician and an uncle who was a magician. A musician and a magician. And my uncle, who was a magician, or actually my great uncle, he was my father's uncle, great uncle, used to take me into the magic shops in New York City. And I remember one day I came and he invited me on a Saturday morning to come into a magic shop. And it was one of the world's greatest magic shop. It was called the Flosso Horman Magic Shop. And in it was Mr. Flosso, the owner, who was probably one of the most famous magicians in the world. And he called me over. He was a little guy. He's about 5'2". He had these Coke rim glasses and a big top hat he always wore. And he called me over and he asked me to do it, or if I'd like to see a magic trick. So you're in the world's greatest magic shop. You know, this is where magicians buy their illusions to saw people in half and apparatus to make people float. So I said, yeah, I'd love to see a magic trick. And he pulled out a magic trick just like this. And what it is he had a top hat, which you could reach in if you want to reach in.
Nothing in there.
Nothing in there. Nothing in the top hat. And what he did is he took this. He has this die. You know, for me as a kid, it was a block with a lot of spots on it, and he put it in the hat. And then he opened up this this box. This is called. This is just a beautiful old wooden box. And he opened it up, and he told me that he was going to do something that was quite interesting, quite magical. And he then took the box. He took the die. And he placed it into the box, and he closed it up. And he shows me the die. He shows me the die. And at which point he then says to me, what side is the die on? And I'll ask you if you want.
Well, it's on this side.
It's on that side. At which point he goes like this. I hear a little noise, and he opens it up, and there's nothing there. So he says, I said to him, it's on this side. At which point he goes like that, and he opens it up, and it's not there. So you know, I'm kind of getting a sense because he's turning the box and I hear this clunk, you know, when he does it. So I figure that he's just basically, well, you know, kind of moving it around, right? So then I, you know, challenge him to open all four doors, and he says, well, kid, you know, it's you know, he called me a kid at the time. I was a little kid, and he said, kid, well, this is, of course, there's nothing in the box. And he opens up the box and he shows me that the box is completely empty, and he says it's been in the hat the whole time.
Wow.
So what happened next really literally changed my life, because as a 10-year-old kid, all I wanted to know, how do you do that trick, you know? And as if reading my mind, he handed me this. This is called the die box, and he handed me this. And this became my first real apparatus to take and do magic shows with. But more importantly, what it did is it taught me the power of the assumption. Because magic is the understanding of human behavior and the assumptions that we make. And it's the goal of the magician to direct you to certain assumptions, which lead you away from the secret of the trick, which we call misdirection. Misdirection.
Yes, you talk a lot about the fact that magic challenges our assumptions. So talk to us a little bit today about how magic challenging our assumptions becomes a good framework to understand innovation.
Okay, to answer that, let me show you the opposite side of it, because the opposite side is, I mentioned, misdirection. And misdirection happens in business all the time. In business, we operate on our assumptions. We have to, otherwise we'd have to stop and think about everything we do. So, as we, particularly in this competitive environment, we are using our assumptions more and more readily. The trouble we get into is we begin to treat our assumptions as a set of truths rather than a set of beliefs, and that's where we end up misdirecting ourselves. So I like to do this as an example. This is Coca-Cola. This is a bottle of Coke, and I place a bottle of Coke here. And this is a trick I've been working on, and I'd like your opinion on. Well, I'll just show it. and you do this. Now, when I do it, most people aren't too impressed. I mean, most people have an assumption about that. They think, I guess, what I'm holding the excuse me, excuse me. There you go. See, most people just assume that I'm holding the bottle upside down because I do have the Coke in it, and that's an example of just challenging assumptions. I know that's going to happen, so when it does, well, anyway. So Coca-Cola is a good example of that, because Coca-Cola back in 1980 decided, or they needed to create a new product because of a dip in market share, and they created a new product called New Coke. They did their due diligence. They tested New Coke. In taste tests, Coke won out. New Coke won out over Old Coke. Well, they made the assumption that based on taste, or a consumer's preference for taste, was greater than the preference for the brand. And so they rolled out New Coke in 1980. They took the existing Coke off the marketplace. They rolled out with this New Coke. They spent millions of dollars, more money than any advertiser had ever spent before. And in 79 days, it was yanked off the shelf. Yanked off the shelf. Why? Because they made that assumption that the consumer's preference for taste was greater than for their brand, and that was not the reality. They prefer the brand. Coca-Cola is the master at building the brand. So that's how you can misdirect yourself. Now, the power of the assumption can be used the other way. The power of the assumption can be used to quickly get you to find new solutions, and I like to illustrate it in this fashion. So this is, we have a coin here. If I place the coin here, the assumption is that the coin is in this hand, right?
Yes.
But if you were to challenge that assumption, what might you assume?
That it's in your left hand?
That it's in the left hand. That there is no coin in this hand. In essence, if you were to challenge that assumption, say, wait a minute, maybe there is no coin, maybe there is no coin, and to follow the other hand, you would discover that, yes, there is nothing in this hand, and the coin is still in the left hand. In essence, you would have discovered the secret of the trick, or a solution that did not exist before. Let me show you again. So your life tells you that it's in this hand, but you challenge that assumption, you follow the other hand, you discover it's not there, and you discover it's still in the left hand. And that's the principle of using the power of assumption, to follow the other hand.
I think you've done something pretty unique in that you've been able to convince many companies, many organizations, that it would be important for them to embrace this concept as magic, as a metaphor for innovation. So tell us about your reasoning behind that, and how you've persuaded companies that this is a great way in which they should look at innovation, and some of the companies that you've worked with along those lines.
Okay. One of the issues of innovation, and the gentleman just before, one of the issues of innovation is that people think it's some kind of revolutionary process. You know, we're now going to be innovative, and all of a sudden everything's going to change. The reality is it's a process. So the first aspect is to get people, empower people to be able to think differently. And that's why we use the metaphor of following the other hand. And it's an easy metaphor to understand. And it's supported by a lot of business case histories. This is an example. This is one of my favorite examples. This is known as the Spin Pop. This was one of the first interactive toys created back in 1995 by a gentleman named John Osher, who owned a toy company called Cap's Toy. Well, he sold this, his company, and it was based on this Spin Pop concept. Basically, a kid would walk up to the counter, press this button, see it spin, and would buy it. And the beauty is that a normal lollipop would cost 19 to 99 cents, and this sells for, when originally sold, for $2.99. When I bought this was $4.99. So by just having this little spinning, it increased the value proposition of it. He retired, made a lot of money, but he's an entrepreneur. And so what he decided to do was to go back and create something, a new kind of a product, a mass market product. And he focused on the toothbrush area. And he decided that the best thing to do would be to create a new kind of a toothbrush that was not a manual brush, but was an electric toothbrush. Now, electric toothbrushes already existed, and they sell somewhere between $60 and $150. But his idea was to create an electric toothbrush that sold for just $1 more than a manual brush. That is, for under $5. Now, the experts in the area, Oral-B, Sonicare, Braun, they all the experts, and they were like, ha ha ha, you can't do that. You can't create an electric toothbrush for under $5 because we are the experts. We know what it takes. The motor, the torque, the waterproofing, it's impossible. Well, John Osher challenged that assumption. He followed the other hand, and he said, well, why not? I understand how to make things in small parts. I've already created a battery and a motor, so for a couple of more cents, I have to figure out how to waterproof it and add torque. And so what he did is he began to work on that idea, and he partnered with Procter & Gamble. And within 18 months, they launched a product. This is the product. It's called the Crest Spin Toothbrush. This is probably one of the most successful product launches. There are 500 million of these units around the world, and it was quite phenomenal. It sold for $4.99. But here's how challenging the assumption also works and following the other hand. When Procter & Gamble wanted to do major advertising, John Osher said, we don't have to do advertising because we already have our advertising. And they asked, what is that? And he said, here's our advertising. Try me. Little button that said, try me.
This is a great example of a disruptive innovation that Procter & Gamble introduced to the market.
That's correct.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Now, you've worked with many companies, and you know, tell me, how have you persuaded them that they need to engage you to make their teams more innovative? Well,
you know, in my book, Follow the Other Hand, which is about everyday innovation, one of the things I talk about is the power of discovery. Well, let's step back. 10 years ago, advertising drove the brand, I think. Advertising really defined the brand. I believe today a brand is defined by the experience. So I believe that one of the most powerful marketing tools that one has is letting people experience yourself. So the way I tend to engage corporations is they discover me. They will see me give a keynote somewhere, or they will see me in a seminar, and once they've seen this experience of how magic is used metaphorically, tied to significant business case histories, and they watch the reactions of the people around them. And the reason the magic works so well is that people have been through many courses on innovation. I mean, there are great courses on innovation. There's great courses on thinking differently and creativity. But many people have been through many of them, and they have a little bit of a wall, a little level of resistance. Well, if you come in with magic, and you begin to talk about magic, and they experience the magic, and they participate it, and they learn it, and then you tie it to a business case history. Well, when you do the magic, it takes the wall down, and when you tie it to the business case history, it's very, very effective.
Well, give me an example of the process, because I imagine it's not simply a 3-hour training where you teach them a hard skill set and they come away and they're ready and set to go and use the new tools in their toolkit.
Right. Well, it's a lot of different ways. We teach, for example, in marketing, we teach the concept of how to build trust. How do you build trust? Well, it's fascinating because trust is an occupational hazard for a magician. When a magician comes out into an audience, they are immediately suspicious. Right? They think they're going to be fooled or something. But in order for the magic to take place, you have to initiate trust. So I discovered that there were 3 things that a magician uses that actually are very applicable in business. The first is choice. You provide options to the individual. Second, control. You let the individual control a situation. And 3 is pre-engagement. You get them involved in the activity before they've actually purchased the product. So for an example, this is an example of, would be an example of choice. If I said here, this is a 10 of hearts, and I said to you, okay, all right, here, pick a card, pick a card. Pick a card.
No.
So you don't have a I'm not giving you a choice. And in not giving you a choice, then what happens is you don't trust. But if I say here, just tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Take a look at the card.
Got it.
Then you trust it, right? Right? You could shuffle the deck or whatever you want, and that card was the King of Spades. Right? Okay. So
brilliant.
Brilliant. But the magic takes place because now I've won your trust. I've won your trust. Now we could do it the other way. For choice, control turns everything over to you. So we'll do a quick little magic trick where you become the magician. So you take the deck of cards, you fan the deck of cards, you tell me, you fan them and put them up like this towards me, and you tell me to think of any card as you're fanning through.
Any card.
Okay, I thought of a card.
Okay.
Okay, now put the deck together. And what I'm going to ask you to do is shuffle the deck. Give it a little shuffle. Now, by the way, choice is very, very powerful. When you give people choice, it gives them the opportunity. So, for example, one of a financial institution, what they do is when they send out direct mail pieces, historically they used to send out for a credit card solicitation, they would send a credit card solicitation and just a picture of a credit card. Well, they found that when they put in 16 different pictures of the credit card, and you could choose the one you want. That is, you can choose the design of the credit card. Same credit card. But when they gave the customer choice, it increased the response rate of that direct mail package by 20 to 30%. So that's the effectiveness of choice. Here, let's do control. Control is now, I'm going to turn the control over to you. Here we go. Turn the control over to you. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take your finger and just run it up and down, and I want you to focus on what I'm thinking about. I'm going to think of the card.
Okay.
I'm going to think of the card.
Okay.
And you're going to do the work. I'm not going to do it. And when you feel that I'm thinking of the card I'm thinking of, just put your finger down on that card.
Okay, this is really hard.
I'm thinking hard.
Okay.
I'm thinking hard.
Got it.
You did it?
Got
it. Okay, put down. Hold on. Here, let go, let go. Over here? That's it.
That's it.
Okay, so you're the magician, you're in control, and you now say to me, Andy, what was the card that you were thinking of?
Andy, what was the card that you were thinking of?
The one?
Yes.
The three of diamonds is what I was thinking of.
Okay.
So now you're the magician, you're in control now.
Okay. I'm going to say, you're absolutely right. It's the three of diamonds.
It's the three of diamonds.
Hey.
It is the three of diamonds. It's three of diamonds. So putting you in control. And now control is used in early stages. For example, Starbucks. Starbucks, you can go in. I mean, think about it in the manufacturing process or the service business where you're turning control over people. They come in and they get to choose the variety of different products that they could have. They can determine, they could do half decaffeinated, half, half regular. They can choose if they want soy milk or regular milk. You're putting the power in the hands of the individual and giving them choice. Now, pre-engagement is the most interesting because what it does, it gets people involved in the product or the service before that. Houdini used pre-engagement by getting the audience to hold their breath before he submerged himself into an old-fashioned milk can. Now, why did he do that? Because by having them hold their breath, they would then discover what it would be like to be underwater, like Houdini would be underwater. They created a level of empathy. So in a sense, by having people hold their breath before he actually did the trick, he already had them buy into the magic before the magic began. A great example of that is M&M's. M&M's used to be, their tagline in the United States used to be, melts in your mouth, not in your hand. Well, back in, I think it was in the late 90s, in the mid-90s, they changed their strategy to colors. And it was the first time a manufacturer allowed you to vote on what the next color M&M is going to be. 10 million people voted. That's evolved now into a shop called My M&M Shop, where you go on the internet and you can select the color M&M you want. You can select what you want written on the M&M. You can select the packaging you want. And you do all that and you haven't paid a penny yet. It gets you, engages you completely into the, or in a sense, makes the audience part of the act. And it's a phenomenal, successful site.
Interesting. So if I'm head of risk management at a major insurance firm, how do I use the theories of magic to do my job better?
Okay, well, first of all, the beauty of risk management is that in the concept of challenging assumption and following on the hand, there is no risk. Because all you're doing is identifying assumptions. And then what you're going to do from there is you figure out what we call the methodology or the idea behind those assumptions, or how do you achieve what you want to achieve. We call it the effect. You select an effect, and then you challenge the assumption behind it. So at the beginning stages, it's all about a thinking process. You're not risking anything. Now, once you expose yourself to these alternative ideas, what it does is it begins to spread your vision out. It widens your vision to allow you to begin focusing and answering very specific questions, which have to do with, is my assumption true or not? We call that, you test the theory. You test the theory. So when you're into testing your theory now, again, there's no necessarily risk behind it, because what you're doing is you're testing a theory of a belief. And that's how the process works.
I think there are some companies that are great proponents of this idea of magic as a metaphor for innovation. I think that Pitney Bowes, Merrill Lynch, HSBC, for instance, are great believers in this. Who are some of the other companies that you've worked with or not that really embrace this idea and have seen some measurable success as a result of it?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of companies. I know, obviously, the obvious companies like Apple. You know, I'm a big fan of Apple's because they have been able to innovate in a very consistent, sustainable way. And I think that you know, any in a sense, technology is magic with drama. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So when Procter & Gamble and MIT joined together to create the Auto ID Lab, which was the first concept of pursuing the radio frequency identification device, how to make one the size of a fingernail at a cost of 1/10 of a cent. The experts in the arena, Texas Instrument, IBM was involved, I think, at the time. They basically said it's impossible. You can't do that. Well, they challenged that assumption. They were able to create that. And they're very much a believer in the concept that technology is magic with drama. A company I worked with years ago in South America, in Brazil, Amil, which is an insurance company, and they were it's a truly innovative company. And what they did is they challenged the assumption of the way healthcare has to be. I think it's called Golden Cross was the leader in the health field in Brazil, and it was a fairly modeled after many healthcare companies in the United States, like Blue Cross, which were big companies and a little bit impersonal and many forms and a lot of waiting to get things processed and through. And they challenged the assumption and said healthcare doesn't have to be that way. Now, part of their success would allow them to do that is they were also made up of many doctors, that it was an idea coming out of a lot of people who were physicians and that knew the area. And so what they did is they said, well, wait a minute, we could change the model. Why does it have to be around the company? Why can't it be around the consumer? And they developed a direct-to-consumer business, healthcare business. It was the first of its kind, and it was phenomenally successful. And everything they did, the services about it. So, for example, if you were caught somewhere in the hills in Brazil, they actually had helicopters that would fly you out. Their own helicopters that would fly you out. If you had a problem at home, you could actually call a physician or a nurse direct and talk to them. And if they felt that you really needed to come to the hospital, they would give you some advice. But if you needed, they would actually set up your appointment to come into the hospital. A revolutionary concept, totally innovative. And they moved from an unknown to probably one of the largest healthcare providers in Brazil.
Right. Name some companies that you would just love to work with because you know that if they embraced magic as a metaphor for innovation, that they would do infinitely better. Who are you just dying to work with?
Well, there's so many companies. Pitney Bowes is a great company because they really are in a very they're very aggressive towards innovation, and they're always thinking about new ways of innovating. I mean, I do a lot of work in the financial companies. And they
do a lot of magic.
They do a lot of magic. They need a lot of magic right now. A lot of right help now. But what's interesting is that magic has been considered a little bit of a esoteric, but really major corporations are embracing it because of its thinking process. Because really what I focus on is the behavioral aspect of the behavioral theories as how we think as individuals that magic is used. I don't know if I have one set company. I mean, I love Bose. To me is a great company, but Dr. Bose is to me a magician in his own right. The constantly creating and innovating fantastic new products. And he is also a challenger of assumptions. So if you go up to Dr. Bose and say, it can't be done, he's the kind of individual that would say, wait a minute, let's challenge that assumption. John Osher, that created the Crest toothbrush, he's the same thing. If you go to him and say, and he says, let's try this, and an engineer we really value says it can't be done, that's when he gets most excited. And he says, let's challenge those assumptions behind it. So those are great companies, but there are so many companies today that need magic only because we are moving so quickly. I mean, there are more products and services than there are people right now. anyone at any time, anywhere in this world, could be doing what any of us are doing, and they could do it faster, cheaper, or better. So this is forcing people to really have to figure out new solutions every day because the playing field changes. And that's where the magic comes in. You know, magic is really about thinking differently to find new solutions.
Great. Do you have a few more tricks up your sleeve?
Well, here's one actually. It's really actually quite interesting. And this time we'll invoke everybody here to help with the trick. I will ask you, Susan, to hold this deck of cards. Now, what I'm going to ask, we'll ask the cameraman over here. We'll start with you to name a color, either red or black.
Red.
Red. Okay, you remember red. Now, over here, Mr. Cameraman behind camera 3, would you please name a, say, odd or even?
Even.
Even. So we have an even red card. And you name a any number between 1 and 13.
5.
5. So we have, well, 5 is an odd card, so we have a 5 odd card. Oh, I'm sorry, you said even? So could you name an even card?
6.
6. So we have 6, a red 6. So cameraman behind number 2, we have, now we have a red 6. Tell me, is it a diamond or spade, whatever you prefer?
Diamond.
Diamond. So what do we have now? We have
the 6 of diamonds.
We have the 6 of diamonds. Okay, 6 of diamonds. So I want you to know all the cards are face up here. Now, what do we say, 6 of diamonds?
Correct.
All the cards are face up, except there is one card that is face down in the deck. There's one card face down in the deck. You want to take that card?
May I look at it?
Yes, please.
I bet it's the 6 of diamonds.
There it is.
Well, all of my assumptions have been challenged today. Andy, thank you very much. This has been great.
Okay.